Go around.
All right. Well, we're live now. This is Eric Van Sickle with a special report for Waverly Newspapers. I'm talking here with former Cedar Rapids Mayor Ron Corbett, who is also a Republican candidate for Iowa governor. Now, of course, the Governor Kim Reynolds is also a Republican. So maybe the first question is, why did you decide to enter the race for governor?
Well, when Governor Branstad resigned to take over as ambassador to China, that created an open seat. And I've always believed that Governor Branstad wasn't going to run again, that this was going to be his last term. But the fact that he took over as ambassador doesn't mean we shouldn't have an active primary. So I think it's good that parties have primaries for a couple reasons. One, it gets the candidates out working earlier, and also there's a great discussion of debate on the issues facing the state of Iowa. So without active primaries and campaigns, the people get shortchanged. So I want to give Republicans a chance to decide who they want as their nominee, just as the Democrat side has 6 or 7 people, and they have also an active primary.
So what do you feel that you would bring to the governor's mansion if you do win?
Well, I announced a new game plan for the state of Iowa last June when I announced I was going to seek the Republican nomination. And that game plan really is into 4 major points. Point number 1 is modernizing our income tax code. We have a very high tax rate in the state of Iowa, 8.98. And that tax rate drives people out of our state and also it hurts when people are trying to move into the state. There's a sticker shock with that 8.98. So I'm an advocate for a flat tax of 3%. That would really make our state competitive as relates to income taxes. But in addition to that, it simplifies the system. Right now, there are so many tax credits and so many deductions that a lot of people have to hire an accountant or a tax attorney or use a website to help navigate their taxes. This would save a lot of money and reduce bureaucracy at the state level in the Department of Revenue. In addition to simplifying, it also makes it fairer. Right now, Iowa's tax system really hammers the middle class. People that make $70,000, joint return making $70,000, pay the top rate of 8.9%. So when you think of high tax states like California, New York, New Jersey, they have higher tax rates than Iowa, but it doesn't kick in until people make $400,000, $500,000. So we have a tax system that isn't fair. So that would be my first part of that 4-point game plan.
Before you go to the next point, you mentioned the other states having their highest rates kick in at higher levels. Why not make things more progressive rather than just have a low flat rate?
Well, what we have in Iowa now is a bell curve to where the low income get tax credits or earned income tax credits, and then the high income get all the deductions, and it's the middle class that takes the hit. So what I want to do is I want to take that bell curve and squeeze it down, treat everybody the same, 3% flat tax. That makes our state more competitive, because right now one of our biggest challenges is workforce. With a low unemployment rate, 2.9%, many businesses are having a hard time finding employees. So it's a training issue, but it's also just an employee issue.
Right.
And when you talk to all the people in economic development around the state, and I was at the Chamber of Commerce in Cedar Rapids for 5 years, the lack of available workforce is going to hurt our ability to attract new companies to our state. Also for existing companies to expand if they don't think they can find the workforce. So when you look at growing states, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Nevada, Arizona, these are all states that have 0 or no income tax. And that's who we're competing against. And also, it's not just a warm weather. Some people think, well, that's people move south because of the cold temperatures in Iowa. But if you go up to South Dakota, the Dakota Dunes, which is on the other side of the Missouri River from Sioux City, that's blossomed with economic development and growth because people have moved over from the Iowa side. See, all this wealth leaves the state, and when you have the wealth leaving the state and the population, that's why you're seeing our growth in our state revenue stunted, and all the budget cuts that the legislature and the governor have had to deal with the last 3 years.
What are the other points of your platform then?
So in addition to the modernizing the income tax and going to a flat rate, point number 2 is improving the water quality in our state. We had a lawsuit from the Des Moines Waterworks against farmers north of us, and we've seen excessive EPA regulations. I think we need an Iowa plan. So I'm in favor of the Natural Resources and Outdoor Protection Trust Fund. This is a dedication of 3/8 of a sales tax penny to improve our water quality, but it also helps out on water quantity issues. And Waverly knows everything about flooding, just like Cedar Rapids does. So most of the conservation practices that farmers use, whether it's cover crops and buffer strips, help with water quality, but they also help slow the water down.
Right.
And that helps reduce flooding. But here's the problem. The state's program, the nutrient reduction strategy, is voluntary. So if a farmer wants to participate in conservation practices, they can. But if they don't want to, they don't have to. Now, what determines whether a farmer does that or not? Well, whether they can afford it. And when the price of corn is $5 and $6 a bushel and beans are 15 and 16, farmers have more money and they can use those resources to put in conservation practices. But when the price of corn is at $3.50, $3.40, and beans are $9.50, farmers are barely breaking even. So we can't allow our water quality efforts to go up and down like the price of corn or beans. We need an annual sustainable funding source, and that's what the 3/8 penny does. And as a matter of fact, it was already voted on by the people of Iowa back in 2010.
Just hasn't been activated yet.
They actually voted to put it in the Constitution. Now imagine the state's Constitution, the United States Constitution. These are sacred documents. They're very hard to amend, but the citizens of Iowa felt so strongly about protecting the environment and the water quality, they put it in the state's Constitution. It just hasn't been acted on. There's been no leadership from Governor Reynolds to support this 3/8 penny, and because she doesn't support it, then the legislature has been timid. But that's my second big issue. My third big issue is innovation in the public schools. So we've seen a lot of rules and regulations top down from the federal government. It could be No Child Left Behind. It could be Common Core. And then we see the same thing out of the state government, always telling our local school districts what they have to do. And really, they become compliance centers where superintendents and teachers are engaged in filling out paperwork and requirements from federal and state rules and regulations. I want to free local school districts up. I think that's what made our school system strong over the years in Iowa, is that local control. And I want to embrace local control and encourage innovation within the school systems, within the public school system. So I like choice. I'm a supporter of homeschool. I'm a supporter of private school, and I'm a supporter of open enrollment. But I don't want to abandon the public school system in the state of Iowa. We have 480,000 kids that go to the public school system, and they deserve to have attention from the governor and the state legislature. And I think one of the ways to do that is provide more local control and provide a way to present some innovation in the classroom. And then on a fourth issue is one about showing concern for people. And as mayor of Cedar Rapids, this is something that's really been important to me, or as a former mayor of Cedar Rapids. After the flood, to see the devastation, to see people that not lost their homes, but they lost everything. They lost their business. They lost their their jobs. I mean, it was a very challenging time for our community, and I want people to know I have their back. And I had the backs of the flood victims in Cedar Rapids, and I'll have the backs of the people of Iowa. So what do I mean by that? I don't like what the governor did, the top-down decision to come up with a Medicaid privatization scheme. I think that has hurt the vulnerable in our state. It hasn't worked, and even the governor admitted finally that mistakes were made and things weren't working.
And you're talking by governor. You're talking about Ambassador Branstad or Governor Reynolds.
Governor Reynolds. She made a statement this last week that mistakes were made. Well, finally, she's admitting mistakes were made. So what are you going to do to correct it? So this is what I would do. There's three pieces of the Medicaid portfolio. One is the disabled community. Two is long-term care, people in nursing homes. And then three are the low-income people. On the nursing home, long-term care, and the disability, I would bring that back into the state for the more traditional fee-for-services. But on the low income, I think there's some benefits to managed care when it comes to prevention, when it comes to wellness. But I don't want to see out-of-state corporations managing that. I'd like to see an in-state, non-for-profit consortium developed to provide that managed care system, to keep all the resources in the state versus shipping them out to these out-of-state managed cares. Also, on the mental health, this is another issue that was really self-inflicted. So the Medicaid top-down decision by the governor, the reason we have all the challenges is because they made the decision from a top-down standpoint without including people. You have to include people in the process when you're making public policy decisions. And the same is true with the mental health system. They closed Clarinda, they closed Mount Pleasant, they closed the girls' home in Toledo. When you close these facilities, the people don't disappear. They go compressed in the system. And that's what we've seen. This compression has caused challenges locally. County sheriffs will all tell you this, that they're seeing a lot of people in the county jails that should be getting mental health treatment. You talk to people in hospitals, they're seeing a lot of people that are coming into the emergency rooms. So all closing those facilities did was compress the system, and in many cases put it on the backs of property taxpayers, which really was a mistake. So I'd like to see more beds opened up at the state level, between 25 and 50 beds to take that pressure. And then I also support what the Sheriff's Association is trying to do, and that is to have these crisis centers around the state.
Yeah, we had a question from a viewer. Sharon was asking, how are we going to remedy the damage Branstad had done to our mental health care? Some of that going to be part of that a mental health care platform you were just talking about?
Yeah, I acknowledge the fact that sometimes public policy, the pendulum can swing too far. And I think that's what they did by hastily closing those facilities, Clarinda, Mount Pleasant, and Toledo. And there's some concern that maybe they'll continue that effort and look at Eldora or the MHI in Independence or in Cherokee. I hope not. Philosophically, if we can have people taken care of a community base, that's the better approach. But we know that some people, severe cases, there just aren't the services or the training at the community base, and why you need at least some beds at the state level to handle people that can't be incorporated at the community base. So adding 25 to 50 beds in the system is going to take that pressure, and also then supporting the sheriffs around the state, their proposal for these crisis intervention centers.
What are some things that you've seen in the early stages of the Reynolds era in Des Moines that you would probably want to do differently if you become governor?
Well, I just see Governor Reynolds as an extension of the Branstad administration. I don't think she's set herself out to be any different than Governor Branstad. So more of the status quo is really what she's going to bring to the state of Iowa. And so if people are happy with the way things are, then she'll get reelected. But if you feel that you're not really happy with what's happened with Medicaid, what's happened with mental health, you're concerned about the tuition going up at the community colleges, you're concerned about tuition going up at the Board of Regents here in Waverly, where my son graduated from Wartburg College. They cut the Iowa tuition grant last year, and the Iowa tuition grant goes to Iowans that select private colleges in the state of Iowa. It's a very valuable program. For one reason, it helps cover the cost of college education, so students aren't adding a lot of debt, but it's also keeping Iowa students here. So when Iowa students graduate from Iowa private colleges, most of them stay in the state of Iowa. And this is really a big problem with our state, where our population is decreasing. We had 73 counties out of 99 that are losing population. And this last year, the school districts around the state, 333 of them, only grew by a little over 1,500 students. See, there are not enough people in the pipeline to replace as people retire. And we're seeing more and more people retiring and fewer people coming in to the workforce. And when you have that combination, that's why your unemployment rate is going down 2.9%. But you have fewer people that are working, because they got 550,000 jobs statewide opening, and you're seeing that manifested in lower state revenue, and why they're seeing some of the budget cuts. So I'm a big believer that you got to have growth.
So what are some things that you'd like to do to attract people back to the state, other on top of what you said earlier of the 3% flat tax rate?
Well, one, you have to show you're welcoming. And you have to say Iowa is open for business, but we're also welcoming to people. Population is really important, and I learned this as mayor of Cedar Rapids. We studied what happened down in New Orleans, and after Hurricane Katrina, they didn't act fast enough to replace their housing stock. And guess what happened? People left New Orleans. Here we are, almost 13 years since Hurricane Katrina, and the population of New Orleans is still less than what it was before Hurricane Katrina. We didn't want that to happen in Cedar Rapids, so we acted swiftly on replacing the housing stock to stabilize that population. So that's an example. There isn't one silver bullet. I can't sit here and say if we just reduced our taxes and had a flat tax of 3%, everything is going to be taken care of. It's a combination of things. People always ask me, well, what's your 30-second elevator speech? Listen, the problems facing our state take longer than the 30-second elevator speech. So the tax modernization is important. You also have to be welcoming. This is for people new coming into the state. And one of the things that I didn't always agree with Governor Vilsack on how he ran the government, but one of the programs that he did that was very successful is he personally went out with the universities and the private colleges and tried to recruit former Iowans to come back to the state. If someone's going to boomerang back, they left, maybe got a job, got some experience, and tried to get them to come back. I think that was a very successful program that he had in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and it would be wise to come up with some variation of that to sell our state. I mean, we go on trade missions to sell our agricultural products, and we go on economic development trips to try to sell companies to come here. We have to also sell people to come to our state, and that's one way to do it.
Another viewer is asking about your views on religious freedom. What do you think about that?
I'm a strong supporter of religious freedom, and I've been concerned about some of the court cases that have ruled against religious freedom. So I'm a strong supporter of religious freedom in the state of Iowa.
This questioner was just then framing it would you be okay with a business owner discriminating against someone because they don't and you mentioned in passing somebody that, like a gay couple wanting to have a cake be made, and they would, and the baker would refuse to do it, and it goes up the course. Would you be okay with somebody discriminating against a customer based on their religious beliefs?
Well, these persons must be talking about the case in Indiana where the individual bakery didn't want to sell a cake to a gay couple that was seeking to have a marriage and a party, I guess. And the Supreme Court has also recently ruled on Hobby Lobby. And so there have been some mixed results from the court cases. But for me, I'm in favor of religious freedom. And I don't want to discriminate against business owners that want to practice their religion openly. So you can frame this thing as someone else is being discriminated against, but oftentimes the discrimination is against the person or the business that has strong religious beliefs, and that needs to be protected.
So how would you define that phrase, religious freedom?
How would I define it? I suppose I would define it in a way that you're able to practice your religion openly.
Okay. Now finally, you're going to be having getting the challenger's disadvantage, even though the governor, Reynolds, will technically be the incumbent, even though she wasn't elected to her current job. But how do you feel? How much of an uphill battle do you feel that you have in next June going up against Kim Reynolds? Well,
I certainly am the underdog candidate. I look back and I think if Governor Branstad hadn't stepped down and he just finished his term out and there was an open seat, would it be a different type of a primary? Maybe it would be, but he was always going to endorse her. We don't appoint our governors. We don't anoint our governors. We elect our governors. So I'm going to give the people of Iowa a choice, the Republican primary. It's an open primary, so people that maybe are independent or lean Republican, but they don't want to be part of the party, they can vote in the primary also, and same is case with on the Democrat side. But certainly I'm the underdog. I'm out working hard. I'm out talking about my ideas for the state of Iowa, and I'm going to try to mount a good campaign over the next 5 months as we have the sprint to June 5th. And I've challenged the governor, not to take any special interest money, especially out of Washington, D.C. I've taken a pledge not to take any swamp money out of D.C. I think there's too much money from special interest groups that are influencing the politicians that get elected. And I think I want to put more power back in the hands of the people, and that's what this campaign's about.
All right. Well, thank you for coming by. You were just want to mention you're in town meeting with a few groups here in Waverly today, and just decided to stop on by to talk with Waverly Newspapers today. This is Eric Van Sickle reporting for Waverly Newspapers, signing off.